Listen to my song.
All right. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new day and a new stream and a new part in the SmHEARTies charity streams. That's right. We are continuing with the SmHEARTies streams. I'm just trying to set that as the background music because I have a little activity that we'll be doing today to kick off the stream before we get into any traditional gaming things. So I feel it is pertinent to have some background music set up, you know? So, let me see here. Actually, would this be good for, like, put on a loop? Sure, let's set the FTL Milky Way battle theme on loop for actually. Oh no, I have the VersaLife 8-bit theme from what was this guy's name? Nordish Sound. Yeah. I don't know. I still have. I just have my entire fucking. I don't know. Streets of Rage could work, maybe. Yeah, sure. Streets of Rage. We'll just have that going in the background for the time being. Anyway. Anyway. So yeah. This is day 2, at least for me, Technically, this whole campaign event thing started on the, the 23rd? So Saturday, and it goes for, a whole week, so the event ends on the 30th. So I'm hoping to reach that $100 milestone by the 30th. But we will see. We are at least a good chunk of the way there right now with the $25 donation from yesterday. Just a few more of those and we'll have hit the milestone, so, who knows? Who knows? As for, I guess I should remind everybody as well as to what the donation is going towards. If you can't tell, it's going towards the American Heart Association. So these donations are going towards fighting heart disease, treating heart disease, and things of that nature. So yes, that's the whole event. The incentives are still in the corner. If you're interested in donating, scan the QR code and it'll send you over to my campaign page, where you can donate however much you want. Now, later on this stream, we're going to be playing some Deadlock. That's my plan for now, assuming it doesn't give my computer an aneurysm like last time. But I made sure everything was set up right last time, so hopefully we'll be okay. Hopefully we will be okay. But before we do that, like I said, I have an activity. Let me bring it up. One moment. Okay. And we will swap scenes. Here we go. This is our activity. That's right. I'm doing a tier list. Fuck it. I figured a little activity to kick off today's stream is a gaming console tier list. Because why not? This idea came to me just today. This idea came to me today, like a few hours ago. And I looked it up and I found this tier list on Tier Maker. I have not made any modifications to it. So yeah, this is what we're doing first. I'm going to be doing this in release order as well. So we're not doing it in like the order of the pinned images. We're doing this in the order in which these consoles have been released. Alright? Which means I'm gonna have to pick through and figure out which one is which. One of these is confusing me for a moment. Hold on. What the fuck is that? That's not a Magnavox Odyssey, is it? No. What the fuck are you? Why do you look familiar yet unfamiliar at the same time? This one right here. What the fuck? What are you? No, you're definitely not a Magnavox Odyssey. Fairchild Channel F? Maybe? No. No, it's not. Holy shit. No. No, it's not a Fairchild. The fuck are you? Yeah, open image in new tab. What the hell? Oh, you're the TurboGrafx. Okay. That's what you are. You're the TurboGrafx 16. Alright. All I needed was a slightly bigger look at the image. The picture, the logo. Hold on, I'm trying to grab drink. Okay. Because this is going to involve a lot of talking. There we go. There we go. Okay. Now, given everything we've got here, it's going to be some interesting things. But I suppose to start things off, we have, it looks like the earliest console we have on this list is the Atari. We got the Atari 2600 right here. Released in 1970, I want to say 7. Yep. 1977. Same year as the original Star Wars movie. Now, the Atari, the 2600 is interesting. The 2600 is interesting because it changed everything, right? Is on like an industry scale, right? Because it was a massive deal when it came out. For the longest time, Atari basically was the only real viable game console on the market. Like the Fairchild Channel F and the Magnavox Odyssey came before the Atari, the 2600, but they both died out very quickly. And pretty much all that was left was the 2600. So everybody was making games for the 2600. And Atari, and so, you know, that made Atari the dominant force, and that also meant that any good game from this era was an Atari game by default, because there was nothing else unless it was an arcade game. And even then, arcade games would regularly get Atari remakes, most of which were garbage, but still. Now, that also means that all the bad games were on Atari. And, oh dear God, were there a lot of bad games. Holy shit. Holy shit, were there a lot of bad games on this thing. Because Atari had no quality control. Atari did not decide whether a company could make games on their console or not. That was not a thing. A company just decided they were going to make an Atari game and get their hands on like a development kit or something and just make a game for it and put it up on the shelf. People could make literally anything for it. And that led to both some weird shit, some good shit, and some very bad shit. And eventually, there was so much bad shit in the market that the entire thing crashed because the entire market became completely devalued, since nobody could reliably know whether what they were putting on the shelf or buying from the shelf was a good game. Because everything was an Atari game. And that's the thing that actually led to like the video game crash of 1983. It wasn't E.T. E.T. was the straw that broke the camel's back because they just made so many goddamn cartridges. To the point that once it did crash, they buried all the cartridges in the Arizona desert. Which, granted, have been dug up now. I imagine they've been sold on eBay or some shit. But they have been dug up. But yeah, E.T. was just the straw that broke the camel's back on the this is business 101 right here, of oversaturation. You do not want your market to become this oversaturated with utter garbage. So, with all of that in mind, I'm putting the 2600 in a solid C tier. It's like really high C tier because yes, because like I said, all of the, all of the game, because it was the only console for its era, all of the good games were on the Atari, but so was all the garbage. And the garbage was so garbage, and there was so much of it, that it actually caused the entire market to crash, to the point that the very idea of releasing a video game console into the market was completely unthinkable for years afterwards. Like, no one dare. The very idea of a home video game console became considered to be just a passing fad because the Atari crashed and burned the entire industry that hard. And and now, actually, onto that, relevant to that, we move on to the Nintendo Entertainment System. It sort of, transitioned directly into the Nintendo Entertainment System, the thing that ended up saving the video game industry in this era, more or less. Because, again, like I said, after this crash happened in the West, this is specifically in the West, mind you, in like North America, Europe was still, Europe didn't have the same kind of home console market that the Americas did. The European market was still obsessed over mini computers. So things like the Commodore, the Commodore and things like that. The little computer consoles, like, computer consoles that were just a keyboard, basically. Right? That's what was going on over in the European market. And the Japanese market, the consoles were still going strong. Consoles are still very much going strong in the Japanese market. For the time being in America, where home consoles died, PC games thrived. It was very much firmly a PC market for a while. So you had like PCs in America after the consoles died out. Consoles in Japan were growing, and Europe was having this sort of weird obsession with mini computers, like Amigas and Commodores and things of that nature, where you had to like slot in cassette tapes into a keyboard, then it would play a game on a monitor. So Nintendo, having broken into the video game market, wanted to break into the home console market over in the West, over here in America. But they were very, very aware now that attempting to straight up just sell a video game console over here was suicide. That was business suicide after what happened with Atari. So instead, they marketed the NES. Well, for one, they called it the NES. They called it the Nintendo Entertainment System. It wasn't a video game console, it was an entertainment system. And they marketed it as a toy. It was just a toy that happened to plug into the TV. And the way they convinced like parents that this was a toy that you plugged into the TV was that originally when you bought the NES, it came with Rob. It came with Rob the Robot and a Rob the Robot game. So it looked like the kid was actually fiddling with a toy that just so happened to have a TV-based gimmick, essentially. And that's also why you got things like the Zap Gun and stuff to give this sort of toy-like appearance to the NES. Until eventually people got used to the idea of, like, enough people got the NES in their households that you could then flip it around and be like, actually, that's a video game system. And essentially reminding everyone en masse that home video game consoles can actually be good and not utter garbage, like what happened with Atari. So it kind of saved the market there. And in fact, the NES lasted for a long ass time. It lasted way beyond, like, it lasted into the lifespan of the Super Nintendo, for instance. Because, I mean, at the time, people were hesitant to adopt the Super Nintendo because they were like, well, why should I have to get a new Nintendo console when I already have one, right? People thought it was people thought it was just a cheap cash grab, the Super Nintendo, for a while. So the original NES lasted for a long ass time. So I think, and there were a good few classic NES games in there. I mean, fuck's sake, the original Super Mario Brothers is in there. And Super Mario Brothers 3. We don't talk about 2. Right? Legend of Zelda. This is where a ton of franchises, classic franchises got their starts. Right? So I definitely put the original NES in like a solid A tier on there. Now, we're not jumping generations yet because I do see some other 8-bit generation consoles in here. And this is where things get a little kooky. This is where things get a little silly. I have to remember what generation of console this thing is. Because the number, if I remember right, the number is a lie. Or it might be a lie, I don't remember. Okay, no. Right. Okay. Okay, that one's fine. Alright, so. Next, so we still have to go over some 8-bit stuff, right? We still have to go over some 8-bit things. And the first one here is this little thing right here. If you're unfamiliar with it, if you can't tell by looking at it, that is the Sega Master System. For anyone who is unaware, Sega did indeed have their own version of the NES. They did not start out competing with the Sega Genesis. They started out with this thing, the Master System. There is a reason you do not remember the Master System. The Master System was not very good. The games in the Master System were not very good. No. They were all just kind of the same, I suppose. Like how do I explain it? Like, here we go. So Sega Master System game box. This is how I explain it. So, like, Sega Master System, yeah, it had these weird sort of backwards compatible things here, but every single box was like this. This is every single Sega Master System game. The box had this weird, like, grid paper art in the background. This grid paper background with the title and some random bit of splash art with that same thing in the instruction booklet, and every cartridge looked like this. It was just black with a little red tag on it that just had, in again, the grid paper, back in the grid paper style, with the little name right here, with the name of the game right here, and then Sega in the corner. That was every Master System game. And Master System was like a really awkward version of the NES. That's basically what it was. Now, granted, and that ended up meaning that ultimately the NES beat the Master System, because the Master System just didn't have the same kind of crazy good library that the NES did. I mean, just look at the stuff in the background here. Most of this stuff, it ended up being like very forgettable games for the most part, or arcade ports, or like licensed whatevers, right? Not much came out of the Master System, although I will give credit, there is a dedicated fan base for the Master System. Because there are some good games in here, right? Like Sonic is in there. Again, Sega classic arcade games are in here, like Streets of Rage and Golden Axe and stuff. So if if you want a collection of some classic, like, Sega arcade games, the Master System is a half-decent way of getting them. It's just that it was nowhere near the NES, which is what it was competing with. So ultimately, the Master System just kind of showed up, turned out to be and then got buried by the NES. And I'm trying to explain just how ubiquitous the NES truly was on the market, because everybody and their fucking grandmother had an NES. It was a international phenomenon. Trying to match that thing would have been an insane feat. So I do not necessarily fault the Master System at all for being okay, if a little awkward. It just so happened that the NES, the Master System, in comparison, just ended up being the coughing baby going up against the NES's hydrogen bomb. It was wrong place, wrong time, Sega, unfortunately. But I will give them credit, so I'll put the Master System in B. Did I play all of these? Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get my hands on all of these systems. Some of these systems are balls hard to get your hands on. Like, I see you, CDI. But I'm steeped enough in this industry, and I've experienced enough of it and done enough, like, I guess you could say, I hate the idea of using this word here, quote unquote, research into this industry and its history to effectively, like, I've seen and researched and experienced plenty of this industry to understand all of this. Like, I know the histories of damn near all of these consoles, from birth to death, the reputations, what the good stuff that came out of it, the bad stuff that came out of it, all that shit. Some of these, trying to get first-hand experience with literally all of it is much harder with some of these, especially with the fact that a lot of these can cost hundreds of fucking dollars to get your hands on. But as far as the Master System goes, I have technically played some Master System games, because I have played, like, the original Sonic, I've played Golden Axe a little bit, I've played a bit of Streets of Rage, or Streets of Rage clones, which are basically just Streets of Rage again. Because those older fighting games are basically all clones of each other, if I'm being honest. Sega made a lot of their money back in the day off of basically cloning their brawler idea and just reskinning it, right? Like side-scrolling beat 'em ups. A lot of the older side-scrolling beat 'em ups are kind of the same. If you really thought about it, like Streets of Rage and Golden Axe, it's like, do you want to do a side-scrolling beat 'em up in modern day, or do you want to do one in fantasy? You know, that kind of thing. Oh, we got a bot. Hold on. There we go. There was a bot trying to promote AI viewers. Every single time, man. Every single time. Anyway. So, who else do we have here? Who else is that? Are you what I think you are? Yep, you're the Sega Game Gear. Oh my lord. Okay, so... and you're the Saturn, aren't you? Yeah. We'll get to the Saturn later. So, these are our two main competitors for the early to mid 80s, right? As far as home consoles are concerned, these are our competitors. Nintendo versus Sega. They are not just competing, however, they are not just competing with each other in this 8-bit home console sphere, because Nintendo has also decided to go mobile and releases the Game Boy in the mid 80s as well. Was it mid 80s? Oh god, boy, holy shit. Wow. What the hell was that voice crack? Holy fuck. Oh no, was it 1989? It was 1989. That's when that came out. And the Game Gear was launched in response. Yeah, 1991. So yeah, these two consoles, they go on for a bit. And as we are entering the next generation of home consoles, which we will get to, we have to take a little diversion into what's going on in the mobile market. Because 1989 comes around and Nintendo releases the Game Boy. And the Game Boy, I'm gonna have to put it in B as well, honestly, because you can tell from the picture, we're talking about the original Game Boy here. The original Game Boy. Because while the original Game Boy was, again, another massive phenomenon that, like, every little kid had at the time, right? And it had plenty of good games on it. Plenty of good games. I mean, fuck's sake, this is where Pokemon started. This is where Pokemon started, and Pokemon ends up becoming, you know, the largest multimedia franchise in human history. And it gets its start on this rinky-dink little thing. But the reason I'm putting it in B and not up in A with the NES is just because the part of the reason they were able to make this thing so... Yeah, that's kind of what I was about to say. The part of the reason I'm putting it in B and not A is because the actual build quality of the Game Boy was utter garbage. The reason everybody had a Game Boy, and potentially more than one Game Boy per family, was because they were so cheap. A single Game Boy was like $90 to $100. It was like $99.99. That's how much a Game Boy cost. And it came with Tetris. It came with fucking Tetris. You get that thing and Tetris at the same goddamn time for $100. That is a deal of a decade. But at the same time, it is the reason they were able to do that was because the Game Boy itself was made so cheaply. You had to fill it with like 4 AA batteries in the back, and the screen wasn't even backlit. So if you wanted to play that thing and it was getting dark, you're sitting in a car on a long ass road trip or something, good fucking luck trying to play your Game Boy as a kid, because it's not backlit. You can't see shit. You're essentially playing with a hyper advanced graphing calculator, which isn't much of an exaggeration because that was the direct inspiration for the Game Boy to begin with. The direct inspiration for the Game Boy was the creator of the Game Boy seeing Japanese salarymen on the bus playing around with graphing calculators to kill time. So he decided, fuck it, why don't I make a graphing calculator that's an actual dedicated games console? Right? Why don't we just do that but make it with actual games? So yeah, that's why. So that's why I'm putting it in B, because it's got some really good games. I mean, it's got Tetris, right? That alone jumps it up immensely. It became a massive phenomenon, but all at the expense of actual build quality of the console itself. Sega saw this and responded with the Game Gear. The Sega Game Gear. They wanted to try and one-up Nintendo in the mobile market as well as the home console market. And the Game Gear is going straight into C tier, because the Game Gear, Sega just flew way too close to the sun. They flew far, far too close to the sun. Sega tried to one-up Nintendo on the whole Game Gear thing by doing a lot. So, the Game Gear, for instance, was it had a properly lit and color screen. So that alone is crazy, right? Compared to the monochromatic, no backlit, like dark ass screen of the Game Boy, right? The console itself, but like that's basically it. That's essentially it. The Game Gear is essentially a home console on the go, because it can effectively play home console quality games at the time for 1991. It could effectively play home console games, assuming they made the Game Gear cartridge and all that. But that's a given. It was just at the expense of literally everything else about the console. The console was significantly more expensive. The console is way bigger. The controls are more awkward because, again, bigger. And the battery life sucked ass. Another big benefit to the original Game Boy was the fact that the original Game Boy was not only sturdy, but that battery life, it could last for days. That thing could last for days. It could probably go for a whole... a Game Boy could probably last for an entire day straight of being on and being used. Which means that, for the intermittent times that a normal person is actually playing it and not, just having it on 24/7, that thing's going to last a long ass time. The Game Gear? the Game Gear is going to last you a few hours at best before you have to plug it in or replace batteries or whatever. I don't remember if it uses batteries or plug-in, but regardless, the Game Gear is only going to last you like maybe 3 hours at best, playing this clunky ass console that's absolutely massive, so that you can't even fit in your pocket anyway. So like, what's the point? Part of the appeal of the Game Boy is that you could shove it in your pocket when you were done with it. You can't do that with the Game Gear. Game Gear is way too fucking big. So yeah, that's the situation in the mobile market. Come the 16-bit generation. Now, as we do hit the 16-bit generation, we start to see some more competitors crop up. So obviously we've got the Super Nintendo, which, honestly, as far as where I put this, I'm really debating like A or S, just because I think, personally, I kind of think the Super Nintendo, the SNES is where Nintendo peaked. I personally feel that's kind of where they peaked in terms of genuine, just straight quality. Right? My biases lean towards the Game Boy and the Wii, but I also understand the sheer enormity of quality that was the Super Nintendo. I mean, fuck's sake, I have the Super Nintendo Classic, right? I've played that shit. I have, I've totally not fucked with it. It's, I've played a ton of Super Nintendo games at this point. It is a genuine quality console that could genuinely play arcade quality games at the same time as giving you a full-on original home console video game experience, right? Like, you could jump from playing an arcade fighting game to a shoot 'em up to a racing game to an RPG like Final Fantasy, and go through a whole story, right? Like, this is where you start getting things like Final Fantasy VI. You start getting real what we would consider traditional video games in that way, right? And not just glorified arcade games. So I would say, yeah, I'd put the Super Nintendo in S tier, because I think this is where Nintendo kind of peaked in terms of quality. And the Genesis is similar, in that I think the Genesis is where Sega peaked in quality. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody agree. I'm pretty sure for the most part everybody agrees the Genesis is where Sega peaked. And people agreed at the time that this is where Sega peaked, considering what happened to the Saturn and the Dreamcast. So, like, I put the Genesis in A tier, because while not quite as good as the Super Nintendo, simply because I don't think it had nearly as many good games. It had plenty of really good games. I don't think it had as many as the Super Nintendo, but the quality itself was still, I think, definitely up there with the Super Nintendo. It was genuinely really, like, good race between the two for who was making the best stuff. So I think this is definitely where the two big competitors really peaked in terms of quality. And everyone else is just desperately trying to figure out how they can try and slip into the market and not die. But none of them made it. So, like, over here, the TurboGrafx 16, it did not make it. TurboGrafx 16 was just... there's probably going to be someone there's probably going to be someone out there who's got a soft spot for the turbo graphics, but just not. No. Just no. Like, let me need to remind you all what this thing looks like. Look at this. Look at this. The games on the turbo graphics, you had like, yeah, like look at this. You had Bonk's Adventure. Turbo graphics just, I mean, yeah, you had like Bomberman, but that was it. For some reason, they were really obsessed with this character called Bonk. Bonk was supposed to be like the turbo graphics mascot for some reason. I don't know why. But yeah, you had Bomberman, you had some fighting games, some like maybe shoot 'em ups or whatever, but it just really was nothing. Oh yeah, over in Japan it was called the PC Engine. But yeah, it really was just, oh yeah, Final Fight. Yeah, it had barely anything. Who the hell are you? There was just nothing to keep it going. Okay, so maybe because it had like Final Fight and Bomberman, I'll give it C instead of trash. But yeah, turbo graphics, not, especially when it was trying to compete with the Genesis and the SNES, not happening. It was not gonna happen. Okay, who do we have? Do we have any more 16-bit generation? I don't think so. Okay, let's get this guy out of the way. You see this? You see what that says? See what that says? I believe that says Panasonic. This, was it Panasonic or is that a Philips? The fact that I'm even, oh, right, it was the 3DO. Right, Panasonic did the 3DO. Yeah, so I think the very fact that I'm having to remind myself of what the fuck the Panasonic console is telling you what happened with the Panasonic. It went nowhere. The Panasonic's attempt to break into the market, Normally, this would be foreshadowing for Sony's attempt to break into the market. Not at all. Not at all. God, no. But we will get to that in a moment as I take a sip of my drink. So, we have gone past the 16-bit generation. Right? Yes, okay. Now, that means we are moving in to the 64-bit generation. Things are getting 3D. We are entering the world of polygons. This is where shit's gonna get real, right? Hello, Tempe. We're talking about video game consoles. This is where shit's gonna get real. So, I have made a video about this. A video that has now apparently been copyright claimed, in that I am not earning revenue on it anymore. Even though it was supposedly for the footage that I used, even though the footage that I used is straight up is from a group of people that aren't the people who copyright claimed the footage, because I assume it's just like a fucking patent troll or some shit. Whatever. I don't know. It's a whole that's a whole other thing. But the fate of this next generation we begin to witness with the beginning of the very first E3. E3 1995. Where Nintendo is still working on this right here. They're still working on this thing, what would become the Nintendo 64, what was originally called the Ultra 64, but they dropped the Ultra eventually. So they haven't finished it. They haven't finished it though by the time of 1995, and they were nowhere near releasing it yet. So that means that Sega and Sony essentially have free reign over E3 to promote themselves. And that's because Nintendo was still at E3, both advertising their current stuff as well as this thing. This is what they shot. This is what they brought to E3 1995. Because they were still finishing up the Nintendo 64. They brought this. I'm just gonna... Can I create a new... Yeah, I'm gonna make a... make a new... Nope. I'm just making a new thing here. I'll make this red as well. We'll just put that there. Anyway. Where's Atari consoles? It only has the one Atari console. We're dealing with like the mainstream generations of consoles, so the 2600 is right here in C tier. We're not dealing with all the other shit that Atari did. Mainly because most of it went absolutely nowhere. Like maybe the 2800, but basically pretty much every Atari console after the 2600 was just a glorified 2600. Because the only games people cared about on the Atari consoles were 2600 games. So every Atari console was backwards compatible with the 2600 because those are the only games people wanted to play. It was just it just became like a negative feedback loop. Now, so yeah, Virtual Boy, that gets its own category. That was what Nintendo attempted. Nintendo brought... Yeah, okay, I made the joke once, but I'm going to make it again. Nintendo brought a coughing baby to a convention that had a hydrogen bomb present. And that hydrogen bomb is called the PlayStation 1, made by originally their partner turned competitor Sony, that effectively took the technology that they were going to use to make a Nintendo console and made their own console out of basically spite. Out of essentially spite. They took all that disc, that CD technology they were going to use to make a Nintendo PlayStation in partnership with Sony, and just said, after the agreement fell apart, they just said, fuck it, we're going to make it our own, and just made the Sony PlayStation instead. And oh dear God, did Sony exploded onto the scene with a console that had, like, it had everything from being relatively cheap to at at the price heard around the world, $299, which cheap as far as their competitors were concerned, because Sony's main competitor this time was Sega with the Sega Saturn, right here. And the Sega Saturn was also an advanced CD console, but the Sega Saturn, unfortunately, was also expensive as shit. It's the rule of threes again. It was expensive as shit because Sega got really... their head got too big. Their head got way too big. Because technically on the global market, the Genesis did in fact outsell the SNES. Even if the games themselves or their performance in local markets weren't necessarily as good. So Sega got a little too big and made this really expensive console that they showed off that, would ultimately not go very far. I mean, gonna be honest, I can't even remember a game that is like specifically a Sega Saturn game. Because, it's the Saturn. It just became really forgettable because the main competitor was the PlayStation, which was cheaper and had top quality games at the same time. So that goes in solid A tier, and the Saturn is going into a C tier as well, because they tried, it just didn't work out. It did not work out. And then, yeah, again, Virtual Boy. And then eventually, a few more years pass, and Nintendo finally releases the Nintendo 64, and the Nintendo 64, while good, is very limited. Nintendo 64 does not have that many games. In fact, it takes some effort, obviously, it takes some effort and some money, but you can track. You can solidly keep track and make a mission for yourself to collect every Nintendo 64 game, because there are just that few Nintendo 64 games. People have made these little sheets with stickers on them to stick to the top of your N64 cartridges, and it's only a few sheets. It's only a few sheets of stickers because there's only that many. Oh, that's my phone alarm. Hold on. There we go. Okay. So, yeah, Nintendo 64, good but limited, so B tier. Now we start moving on to the next generation. This is where bits start mattering less, and it starts... I don't know how you describe this generation, but this generation was... For a lot of people, this generation, I think, is considered very peak. The symbol, I think, for this generation, the big symbol for this next generation, is the PS2. Absolutely the PS2. So Dreamcast comes out in this generation. It doesn't quite work out for them either. It ends up in the C tier. A lot of it just wasn't working out. It was a lot of neat ideas that just didn't go anywhere, unfortunately. And that's the death knell for Sega in the console industry. In the meanwhile, Nintendo releases the GameCube, which is actually pretty good. It's pretty good. It's definitely an improvement upon the N64. It's got more games. It's got higher quality games. But it's still not like that super S tier quality because it's still Nintendo's still being a little prick about shit. Because mainly for the same reason as the N64, because both of them are using the medium of their games. So like the N64 uses cartridges. The GameCube used mini CDs, not actual CDs like the PlayStation. Mini CDs, those tiny ones, right? The reason Nintendo did this for both of them is because of piracy concerns. Because Nintendo's a Japanese company, and they consider piracy to be one of the highest forms of fucking crime over there. They're obsessed with it to this day. They consider you to be a genuinely morally repugnant human being if you pirate anything, even once. Even if it's not available to you, even if you can't buy it at all, the idea of acquiring it somehow makes makes Japanese people lose their fucking minds. They lose their goddamn minds over this shit. Like, seriously. There was one guy, who he restored a loves YouTube chat more than Twitch chat. Is the Switch in trash? Yeah, I'll get to the Switch eventually. We'll get to that discussion eventually. It just so happens that it's one of the most recent consoles on the thing, so you know, we're doing this by the proper timeline as best I can remember. Right? Now, and on that note, yeah. So, again, they keep Nintendo continuously kneecapping itself over its concerns with things like privacy and shit. Not privacy, piracy. And so that ends up limiting the GameCube's potential, because the GameCube, it could have been so much better, but the discs, those mini CDs, could only contain so much data, and therefore it made the console harder to develop for. Whereas the other consoles on the market, you could do so much more, because there was so much more space to develop for and put onto a disc. But Nintendo's like, no. We have to make sure it's legitimate, otherwise pirates might get it. Ooh. Oh god. It's fucking ridiculous. It's why Nintendo also has like these proprietary circuits on their older consoles as well, inside the cartridges that have the Nintendo logo on them. And so part of the way those older consoles worked was that, I think it was with the NES especially, or no, the Game Boys. They would read not just the initial boot up data of the cartridge, but also scan for the Nintendo logo on that chip. If it didn't have the Nintendo logo on that chip, it wouldn't boot up, because it would detect that, and essentially that was the sign that it was supposed to be like a pirated cartridge, because it didn't have the logo. It's like, fucking hell. Because Nintendo are just real hard asses about it. Obviously that older stuff has been cracked at this point, but like, son of a bitch. Yeah, so that's the current situation for Nintendo's foray into this generation. But this generation also has Nintendo also, this is also a generation where Nintendo brings in the Game Boy Advance, right? And the Game Boy Advance is just the Game Boy, but better in every single way, honestly. I mean, if we're being honest, It's the Game Boy, but it's got color, it's got a backlit screen, it's got high fidelity graphics. It's just the Game Boy, but better in every way. It's got shoulder buttons. It's got a better form factor. There's no Game Boy Advance SP in here, and I'm very disappointed by that, but, you know, same idea, right? Peak Game Boy. Peak Game Boy. And also the last Game Boys. Yeah. And meanwhile, the other home consoles in this generation, you've got the PlayStation 2. Which, oh dear God. Yeah. Actually, yeah, GOAT. I'm putting PlayStation 2 in the GOAT. I'm sorry, I am. I don't know. I don't think that's going to be very contentious with most people, but I'm putting PlayStation 2 in GOAT. GOAT tier. It's the highest selling video game console of all time for a reason, man. It's also got the largest video game library out of any console in history. And it's got that for a reason. It was easy to develop for. Fun to control. Easy for a player to, to handle. Right? And again, that whole easy to develop for thing led to it having just about any possible game you can think of in its library. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a given. It's one of those things that's hard to quantify. It's difficult to quantify. It's the PlayStation 2. The PlayStation 2 was, to its era, what the NES was in its time. Right? Like, it was a global phenomenon. Everybody either had a PS2 or wanted a PS2, because the PS2 just had everything. Sony dominated this generation. They crushed it. Just absolutely crushed it. And then a little while later into this generation, Microsoft comes onto the scene. Because Sega dies, right? Sega dies. Microsoft comes onto the scene to de facto replace them, right? And the way they do that is, of course, with the original Xbox. The original Xbox, specifically here. The big one that's actually kind of shaped like an X and has, like, the Beast controller and shit. The one that had Jet Set Radio on it and stuff, because Sega worked with Microsoft to port a lot of Dreamcast games to the Xbox. I think once Sega realized that it was time to bow out of the console industry, they, instead of jumping towards like Nintendo or Sony, with Microsoft coming onto the scene, they decided to jump to Microsoft and basically offer all of their Dreamcast titles to get ported onto the Xbox, and, release as Xbox titles to help Microsoft compete with Nintendo and Sony. And you know what? It helped, because again, it had stuff, was Project Gotham a Sega game? No. But, I mean, the main thing, it had a racing game. It was like Sega GT Racing or something like that? Along with stuff like Jet Set Radio and all that other stuff. What was it? Space Channel 5. Space Channel 5 is on the Xbox as well. Yeah. They brought on Sega's games, along with, of course, the Microsoft games like Fusion Frenzy and Halo, obviously. And so that very solidly put the Xbox on the map. I'd say the original Xbox is a solid A tier. Solid A tier. Good, lot of good games, lot of industry setting. I mean, fuck's sake, it has Halo. It has fucking Halo. Like Halo alone, with the kind of generational trilogy that it would create, yeah. Halo alone deserves to put the Xbox in A tier. That's not even discounting everything else. So, that's our current situation with home consoles. Back to the mobile market. Sony has decided to... Well, actually, no, not... Sony hasn't done this first, right? Which one was first? 2004. Okay. 2004. Oh shit, they released the same year. Okay. It doesn't matter which one I pick then. Okay. So, yeah, 2004 comes around. This is a few years after the release of the Xbox, and Nintendo and Sony have decided they're going to compete in the mobile market now. Just like Sega and Nintendo did. Nintendo comes in roaring with the DS. And considering there's only one version of the DS here, we're not counting the 3DS. That's technically a different console altogether. Different generation altogether. This thing should mean the DS, the DS Lite, the DSi, all packed into, this thing, because those are all technically just versions of the same console. So, Nintendo comes out swinging with the DS, and the DS just crushes it. 150-something million units sold. It is the second most... The DS is the second most sold video game console, period. The only thing that has sold more than the DS is the PlayStation 2. That's giving you the idea. In fact, I probably... There we go. I put it higher than the Super Nintendo. Because it changed mobile gaming. It was not only fun, it had good tech, it was still relatively inexpensive, and there was actual creativity that could be put into developing games for it because of the touchscreen. And it had backwards compatibility with the Game Boy. So you could play Game Boy games, you could make games that were like Game Boy games but more advanced, or you could say, fuck it, I'm gonna make a touchscreen game. Or do what Nintendo did and release a game that's a bunch of royalty-free books. Okay. Yeah. Okay, Nintendo. I don't know why you did that, but okay. Also, peripherals out the ass. Peripherals out the absolute ass with that thing. Sony competed with the PSP, and I have to be careful not to upset my dad here. Because my dad loves the PSP. He loves the PSP, and especially he loves UMD, the Universal Media Disc format. The format used for PSP games. Those little disc things you slotted into them that could play not only video games but movies and TV shows, because they're supposed to be the Universal Media Disc. The PSP it's similar to the Dreamcast in the sense that it was way ahead of its time. Like it's just that I think unlike the Dreamcast, it had a lot more real quality to it. So it's just that, not to say that the Dreamcast didn't have quality, it's just that the Dreamcast, it died too quickly to truly build up a real library for itself aside from its initial pack of games. Right? And then those initial pack of games, again, got moved over to the Xbox anyway. It just didn't have enough time to build up an actual library. A proper library and a proper legacy that wasn't somehow attached to the Xbox at some point. Whereas the PSP lasted for a long time. it lasted for a long while, consistently competing with the DS. It's just that it didn't go anywhere further than the DS, and it never got anywhere close to the DS in terms of actual popularity. Like, the PSP showed up, got popular, had its growth spurt, essentially, and then just kind of plateaued. It didn't stagnate, necessarily. It didn't get bad. It just kind of stayed in its lane. It stayed where it was, while the DS was exploding onto the scene everywhere. Everybody getting a DS. But, where the DS appealed to everybody, the PSP was like the enthusiast's equivalent, basically. Because the whole appeal of the PSP was to be like a PlayStation in your pocket, right? I mean, that's literally, it's the PlayStation Portable. The entire point was that it was supposed to be as technologically close to a PlayStation or a PS2 as you could get, while still being portable and enjoyable to play. So that led to a lot of compromises, and it led to it being a much more enthusiasts-leading mobile console than the DS, which was designed specifically to appeal to everybody, from the enthusiasts to the kids to even to friggin' your grandma who just wants to use it to read books. That was what was going on there. And that's kind of how things stayed for a bit, until finally we get to the generation that I grew up with. Now, well, I say that I grew up with. I did have, I grew up with the generation of like the PlayStation and the GameCube and stuff like that. I had the GameCube, I had a PS2, I had a DS. I eventually got my hands on a PSP, but I think that was after its time. Also, I'm pretty sure the only reason I had a PSP was because it was eventually given to me by my dad. I'm pretty sure he originally got a PSP for himself and then eventually handed it over to me. Because he definitely bought some UMD games. He definitely bought some UMDs for himself. Like, because I distinctly remember watching, what was it? Kung Fu Hustle? Was it Kung Fu Hustle? No, it was Shaolin Soccer. I distinctly remember, yeah. It was, I watched Shaolin Soccer on it when I was on a vacation once. Visiting my granddad in Florida. I had Shaolin Soccer on that thing. It was, yeah. That was something else. But the generation where I truly became like cognizant, I guess you could say, and really started identifying with gaming as like my primary hobby rather than just a thing that I had because I was a kid, is the 7th generation here, with the Xbox 360, the Wii, and the PS3. And so we'll go with Nintendo first here. The Wii. I mean, come on. It's the Wii. I have to give it at least A. I have to give the Wii at least an A. It's the Wii. We're talking about the original Wii here, but I'm giving the Wii S, because holy shit. The Wii, where Nintendo started to fall off Nintendo fell really hard with the Virtual Boy, still not doing too hot with the Nintendo 64, but getting there, finally beginning to climb out of that rut with the GameCube. They reached their second peak with the Wii. Like the peak with the DS and all that stuff, that's a whole other market you're dealing with, so I'm not necessarily counting that. in terms of the whole reaching peak sort of thing. So that's, you know. Sorry about that. This is definitely Nintendo's like second peak here. And, you know, the joke was like Satoru Iwata and Miyamoto in that one GIF where they're holding a Wii and it's literally shooting out dollar bills while their little PNGs of themselves are screaming, "It prints money!" Right? That was the Wii. That was the Wii. It was Nintendo's little money printer. That was because just like the DS, everybody was buying it. Kids were buying it, parents are buying it, a lot of normal gamers are buying it purely, if anything, out of curiosity for this whole motion control thing. And grandparents are buying it. I mean, hell, nursing homes were buying it because old people loved fucking Wii Sports. Playing bowling and Wii Sports. That got their attention. Holy shit. Right? It got so bad in 2009 that most stores genuinely ran out of Wiis the morning that they got their shipment of Wiis in. There was a consistent shortage of these things on the market. They would get a shipment of Wiis in like a GameStop would get a shipment of Wiis in that morning. They would stock them, and then by the time lunch rolls around, they are completely sold out of Wiis already. That's how crazy the Wii mania got. And then, you know, eventually everybody and after all of that, everybody eventually just had a Wii. And so the Wii market, while people weren't buying Wiis anymore after like a year or two, the market for the Wii was still constantly there, because now that everyone had one, there was always a chance that someone would decide, you know what, I kind of feel like getting a new Wii game or checking out what's new, right? Suddenly they've got a massive audience that's just sticking with them, even if casually. Now, as far as the enthusiast market goes, this is where my bias is going to show. This is absolutely where my bias is going to show. Hard. And I mean hard. Xbox 360. Boom. I'm putting it in GOAT tier. This is my... Now, the PS2 is the overall GOAT in terms of the industry. The 360 is my personal GOAT. That is my personal GOAT console. I grew up on that shit. The 360 for me was the peak of gaming in most ways. Games looked good. They had fun online functionality, specifically through Xbox Live. Xbox Live was amazing. Absolutely ridiculous and insane, and sometimes extremely vulgar and obscene, but amazing. There is something special about being in an Xbox Live party chat back in the day, where everybody is just talking shit while you're in a Halo Reach custom lobby and in like Forge, and people are just fucking around and occasionally insulting each other and getting into shouting matches, or like getting into a party and trying to break GTA 4, right? There was something truly special about that sort of online connectivity with Xbox Live. And then on top of all that is the Xbox Marketplace, the 360 Marketplace. Because not only could you start buying, like, you know, expansion packs and things like that without needing to buy a physical disc anymore. You could just buy the expansion pack and download it onto your hard drive. But on top of that, there was now the Xbox Live Arcade, where indie games could be bought and downloaded for cheap prices and also promoted by Xbox on the marketplace. Indie games, not published by Microsoft or anything like that. Completely independent titles that otherwise would have gotten barely any visibility, finally getting noticed and bought and played and getting like fan bases built around them, where otherwise they probably would have just slinked away into the darkness. And yes, technically the Xbox Live Arcade started as an original Xbox thing, but that was again another situation of you needed to physically have an Xbox Live Arcade disc to then put into your Xbox, and then that would allow you to connect to the arcade and acquire the games. But through the 360 and the more modern internet connectivity, you didn't have to do that anymore. You didn't have to get a disc and go through this whole process of reaching the Xbox Live Arcade. The Xbox Live Arcade was just always there every time you went to the 360 store. And then it had avatars, it has the original Xbox 360 controller, which for me, the 360 controller has always been the best console, like the best controller straight up. Like I know some people argue that the PlayStation controller is the best one, but for me, the 360 controller has always felt the most natural. It just feels the most natural to put in my hands. So, and it sort of reached its zenith with the 360 controller. Every Xbox controller after that, from Xbox One and the Xbox Series controllers, they haven't really changed anything from the actual layout of the controller. They'll call the buttons something different. The X button in the very middle of the controller might be made of different material or something, you know, but the overall controller, the shape, the ergonomics, they're all the same. Because why fix what isn't broken at that point, you know? And then finally, Sony comes in with the PS3, and I did also have a PS3, and there were some really good PS3 games. I still really, really, really want the Infamous games to be put on Steam already, god damn it. I know, I have seen that there's a decent emulator for Infamous 1 now, but still, I want, like, proper, you know, maybe we can get, like, proper remasters of Infamous 1, 2, and Festival of Blood on Steam. Maybe even Second Son, if we're feeling a little frisky. I know personally, I know some people don't like Second Son because of how it kind of treats the story post Infamous 2, but I liked Second Son. I thought Second Son was cool. It's a fun game, even if the story is a little confused about what it wants to be. And I think Delsin's a pretty fun little character to play as. But yeah, I think I definitely want those Infamous games. Yeah, PS3 was definitely good, but it had a lot of the same problems that the Saturn did, in that Sony got way too high off their own fumes. That's not even the right term. They're sniffing their own farts, basically. Where, you know, they were like king of the world with the PlayStation 2, right? And so they thought that, oh, well then anything we do for the PlayStation 3 people will buy it because it's us. It's Sony. It's the PlayStation guys. You know, we have a captive audience. They'll buy anything we throw at them. And so they made this super advanced console that has a bunch of like random technobabble shit thrown into it that means nothing to your average consumer, but does all it serves to do is just inflate the price of the console. It just makes the console astronomically more expensive. By the end of it, the console was like, what, $500, $600? Where the Xbox 360 was like $200 cheaper, and the Wii was another $100 cheaper than that, I believe, something like that. And on top of that, when the PS3 launched, oh dear God, a lot of it was broken. Oh, was a lot of it broken. And the rollout and getting games on it was an extremely slow rollout because the PS3 had so much complicated and proprietary technology shoved into it, like that damn processor, that developers had no idea how to actually make games for this damn thing. Because the architecture was just so bizarre, and it was so bizarre and expensive. And so, while in the end, the PS3 was technically the higher quality console, it was still just so expensive and complicated that it kind of just trotted along while the Xbox became the face of the industry for this generation. Especially since the Xbox 360 had, you know, Halo fucking 3 on it. Which was, you know, you gotta look up footage of some of the promo stuff that happened with Halo 3. Some of that Halo 3 promo events and stuff like that, absolutely insane. It was a genuine cultural phenomenon at the launch of Halo 3. Like, finishing the fight. That was something else. I really wish I was more cognizant back then for Halo 3. Because Halo 3, I was a little too young. I was a little too young for that one. I was like 10 years old for Halo Reach, you know? So, 10 or 11 at least. So, PS3, I will acknowledge its overall quality, but for all of the terrible, terrible business decisions made during its lifespan, I'll put it in A rather than S. It could have been an S for the sheer quality, but yeah, no. It just couldn't make it. Oh boy, we're almost there. We're almost there, people. We have a few outliers to deal with. One outlier I'm going to deal with right now because I don't remember when it actually released. This thing. I don't know why this is here, of all consoles. This is the Ouya. Who remembers the Ouya? I kind of remember the Ouya. The Ouya, and I specifically remember the Ouya only ever having, like, one game. And, yeah. I think technically it had more games, but, like, it was the fucking Ouya. I don't know. No. We're not going to talk about the Ouya any further. Thank you very much. PS Vita. Sony's at this point in time final attempt in the mobile market. How do I describe it? Honestly, it really is just the PSP, but slightly more advanced, and it ultimately met the same fate as the PSP, of just getting overshadowed by everything else. And that everything else being the 3DS, which while not a game changer, was still pretty good. It is still a good mobile console, but nowhere near the game changer that the DS was. And it still very much managed to overshadow the PS Vita. I'm pretty sure most people didn't even know Sony released a sequel to the PSP to begin with. Alright. Next gen... yeah, we're on the final generation. The PS4, the Xbox One, and the Nintendo Switch. Notably, the original Nintendo Switch, not the Switch 2. We don't have PS5, Xbox Series, and Switch 2 on here. Now, I can go and add those images. But first, we're going to do this. So, I would say the PS4... So, as far as this generation overall goes... Well, actually, first we have the Wii U to consider. Oh, poor Wii U. Yeah, no. Wii U, I'm sorry. I know Scott the Woz loves you, but I'm putting you in trash tier. The Wii U was just the most confused console Nintendo's ever made at this point. Nintendo couldn't... Just by the name, you can kind of tell. From the very beginning, it's like nobody could figure out what is this thing? Is it a new console? Is it meant to be an add-on for the Wii? Is it a direct sequel to the Wii? What the fuck is this thing? And I don't think Nintendo knew either. They just kind of threw a bunch of random shit at the wall with the Wii U to see what happened, and none of it worked. And so Nintendo kind of fell into another dark age that they had to get. They had to get Mystery Wata to pull them out of. So, Sony kicks off this next generation, I believe, with the PS4. And the PS4, I got the PS4 on launch for Christmas. Well, not on launch, Christmas the year it launched, right? And it's good. It's a solid console. PS4, solid console. Problem, it degrades pretty quickly. And the degradation can get bad. Like the fans get loud as shit. A lot of people don't know to check the crevices of that thing for bugs. Literal bugs. But at the same time, the PS4 weirdly reliable. It's a stubborn little thing. for all of its rough edges and its faults, it is a stubborn ass console, and it managed to live through. It managed to live through the whole generation relatively smoothly. I know my PS4 still works technically, but if you turn it on, its fans go crazy loud. It's a very weird looking sort of shape design for it. But you know what? It worked for this generation. So I'll put the PS4 in a solid A. Xbox One. I don't like you. I have many grudges against you. How dare you sully the 360 like this? I was there. I was there for the controversies, you little shit. I'm putting it in C tier because it had some decent games on it. But the controversies attached to this thing are too much to not consider. For one, the original, when this thing was launching, originally, you had to have the Kinect. The Kinect was a requirement. You had to have the Kinect plugged in at all times. Secondly, the Xbox One had to be online at all times. The Xbox One would not function without online connectivity in any way. which means effectively no game was offline or was truly offline or single player, because the console itself was not offline. And then on top of all of that was the idea of not being able to share your games, aka when originally what they were going to do with the Xbox One was that when someone bought an Xbox One game and put the game disc into the console would essentially digitally mark the disc with a marking for that console specifically to indicate that it has been used and it is being used by X console. And that would mean that if you then put that disc into another Xbox One, that disc would not be read. It would not be usable by that Xbox One because it's already attached, because that disc is now attached to a different Xbox One and a different account. So you would not be able to share your games anymore. Essentially making the reselling market cease to exist. Along with, again, sharing with friends, right? And I mean, it got to the point that Sony made fun of them for that by, at the time, creating a tutorial for how to share your PS4 games. And it was just the Japanese executive handing a PS4 game over to the American spokesperson, and the American guy going, "Thank you." And that was the end. That was the end of the tutorial. It was a very funny video at the time, and everyone's furious at Xbox for all this, to the point that they had to eventually backtrack and rework the Xbox for all of those features. They had to remove all of those features and make the Xbox One essentially just a glorified Xbox 360 with slightly better graphics. But the controversies really hurt that thing, especially just in general. Again, because it was just a glorified 360. And it wasn't even totally compatible with the 360. So people were like, if this thing's basically just a 360 but with slightly better graphics, why would I bother getting it when it has less games? And it doesn't have the same kind of social functionality that my 360 does anyway. Like, okay, fuck you then, I just won't buy it. So it ended up losing out to the PS4. Which, actually learned its lessons from the PS3. Alright, and now, we get to the Switch. I understand we have the controversies going on right now in the current generation with the Switch 2. I will grab images for the current generation of consoles, including the Switch 2. Right now, we are talking purely about the Switch 1. The original, the one from 2017. Okay? The Switch 1 was the thing that basically saved Nintendo's ass after the disaster that was the Wii U. Switch trash, or unsubbing, unchatting, and unfoundering. If I recall correctly, it's my power. I'm the one that has the power to remove your founder badge. That's my power. I reserve that privilege. So PS5. Yeah. Oh god, no, these images are too big, holy shit. Will it scale down the image? I hope so. So PS5, Switch 2, And then Xbox Series. Okay, I have those saved, so add additional images. There, alright. We have the modern generation up here now. So, the original Switch saved Nintendo's ass. And genuinely, the original Switch is a really good ass console. It really, really is. It has a lot of now, like, classic modern Nintendo games on it. Right? A lot. And the very idea of a full-on home console that can simultaneously be turned into a mobile console changed the game forever. Like that was an industry setter right there. I'm pretty sure that's part of the success of the original Switch is probably part of what led to the development of the Steam Deck. This idea of being able to pack a home console into that thing and actually make good games out of it. Like, you know, it had shit like Breath of the Wild in it, right? Breath of the Wild's fucking great. Now, Tears of the Kingdom is, personally, I think, a little derivative, but the point still stands. The point still stands. The original Switch is a really good console, and it's a good console, and it saved Nintendo's ass. So I'm giving that one a solid A tier. But then we get into the next generation. And this is where things... Oh boy. Because the Switch 2, the sequel, do I have things to say? Oh god, do I have things to say? Because it's Nintendo's obsession with piracy rearing its head again. With there we go, get that off the mic. It's Nintendo's obsession with piracy rearing its ugly head again. It's the same problem with the Nintendo 64, the same problem with the GameCube, and then it shows up again with the Switch 2, where they keep fucking with the way you play your damn console. You play your damn games, your physically owned games, because Nintendo doesn't want to risk some random person somewhere in the world from pirating even just one game that they like. For whatever reason. Nintendo's just obsessed with this idea. Obsessed. And this time it manifests in the form of virtual game cards. Woo! Where now, when you buy a Switch 2 game, you do not buy a cartridge that has the game on it. You do not buy a physical game cartridge. You buy a cartridge that has a license for the game on it. So when you put it in it's essentially telling the console to then download and install the game. It doesn't actually have any game data on it, like a normal game cartridge would. And this, combined with Nintendo's other certain policy, means that if they detect you fucked with the cartridge, or you fucked with the console in any way, because now Nintendo can essentially use your account activity to track what you're doing on the console. If they detect that you're fucking with the products that you have purchased and own physically, turns out Nintendo's decided you don't actually own those, and if you're doing something they don't like, they'll just fucking brick it. If you're doing something with their console that they don't like, that they don't want you doing, like, I don't know, you're working on an emulator on it, fuck you, get bricked. So they'll just remove your ability to use the console, even though you purchased a physical product that you own, that is in your home. It is essentially the virtual equivalent of someone finding out that you, like, modified your bike, like your motorbike or your car, that then the company, like the manufacturer, then finds out you did that, and then shows up to your goddamn house and smashes your car as a result, and then leaves a little sticky note that says, "That's for breaking our TOS." See, this is why the Stop Killing Games movement's really important, okay? Go support Ross Scott. Seriously. And on a similar note to that, fuck you, Pirate Software. Stop Killing Games is a positive movement. You just have a stick up your ass. So, yeah, with everything surrounding the Switch 2, regardless of any actual quality that the Switch 2 might have, is just supremely outweighed by all of the additional bullshit that weighs it down. So I just can't support that thing. I cannot support the Switch 2 when it's currently being overseen by a company that will absolutely just destroy you the moment you start fucking with it. And the fact that they have deliberately built it to be that way, specifically, that especially. Like, the original Switch, you can still modify. You can still modify and fuck with the original Switch. Because the original Switch isn't built in such a way, it wasn't constructed in such a way as a console to get fucked with like this. That's the problem with the Switch 2. The Switch 2 and its subsequent game cartridges are specifically made to be manipulated like this, to allow for Nintendo's, like, overbearing control. You know, that's why I give the original Switch, you know, a pass, because you can still modify it and do whatever. You know, people still put emulators on that thing. Now, as for the other two consoles of our current generation, the Xbox Series, I don't even know what the hell it is. I'm honestly going to have to put this in C tier because I still can't figure out what the hell Xbox was thinking with the Xbox Series. Like, what the hell is it? I don't know. Don't understand. It feels similar to the Wii U problem in the sense that the entire lifespan of the Xbox Series consoles has just felt so confused. Like, they had some initial idea of a souped up Xbox One, but then after that, they didn't know what other selling points to give it, so they just kept throwing ideas at the wall and making newer versions of it, and until it just became this mess of a console. So, yeah, I don't know, C tier. It's an Xbox, it's got decent games, because the modern generation has decent games, and most of them are on Xbox as well as everything else, right? So it's like, okay, I guess, if you're just seriously loyal to the Xbox brand for some reason, there you go. I think the console that has definitely won this generation is the PS5. Regardless of how expensive it is, and regardless of the CD things going on with it, I personally have a physical version, like a version of the PS5 that has a disc slot, right? And not a tacked on one that's actually, like, built into the console from the beginning. I didn't buy a virtual one that I then attached a CD drive to it. I got one with a CD drive on it. Since unlike Nintendo, Sony actually allows you as the consumer to have a fucking choice. At least right now. Which I appreciated. So, yeah, I mean, PS5, it's also just got most of the good games. It's got the games on it that, everyone else has. And it has a few games on it that no one else does, because Sony is still over here playing the exclusive game for some reason. And also, Sony decided recently to take its ball and go home as far as PC is concerned. Because Sony realized that every purchase on PC means they are essentially funding their competitor, because Valve is making the Steam machine now. And they don't want to inadvertently fund their own competition. So, because of that, because the PS5 is ultimately nothing special, I'll put it in B tier. It's a solid, okay console. It's certainly better than the other choices we have in our current generation, but it's nothing special. Nothing crazy. And then finally, I mean, come on. I know it's technically not a console, but it's on here. PC. Where else was PC gonna go? Where else was the PC going to go? Aside from the fact that I am a primarily PC gamer to begin with, where else was this going to go? The form of gaming that has the most games, period, because of this, it has the most games on it. It has the least control, because you can do whatever the fuck you want on it whenever you damn well please on a PC, because it's your damn PC, to the point that you can control the operating system. And you can even control, and like I said, control, that's the big thing. You can even control what your controls are. Your graphics, your controls, your games, everything. You can control everything when it comes to PC. With just enough know-how and research, you can effectively do anything you damn well please. PC is effectively the ultimate gaming experience, as far as I'm concerned. You do home consoles for the convenience. Home consoles are for the convenience. But if you're looking for just if you're looking for as much of an enthusiast gaming experience as possible, with as many options as possible, you go with the PC. You just go with the PC, So, yeah. That is my console. That is my gaming console tier list. Yeah, take a good look at it. I'd say it's pretty good, pretty solid, accurate, if you will. For the most part. Obviously there are certain biases being shown here. Like I said, I put 360 in the GOAT category. And there are specific asterisks attached to the Switch 2 explaining exactly why it's in the trash tier, because it's not just about the console itself. But yeah. Yeah, that's something. That's right. TheRatMan. Sorry, I didn't mention. I don't think I mentioned, but if you can see in the on the upper right, upper left corner of my screen there, as of right now, I need to fuck with the channel point things. The channel points, those channel points currently don't work in the sense that I'm not that they're not going to be acknowledged, because right now rat.png is a donation incentive for the charity fund. So right now it's if you want a rat PNG, you donate $10, $20 for a rat GIF instead of a PNG, and then $30 to set the background music for 30 minutes. Those have been my incentives. I am trying to raise the money. I'm trying to raise the money to fight the heart disease. So, yeah. Oh boy. And look at that. God damn. I looked back at the session again. And this stream, I initially thought this was just gonna be like a little kickoff thing, maybe an hour. But no. This whole thing has gone on for 2 hours long. 2 hours straight of me talking shit about video game consoles. Holy hell. I can really yap, huh? Ah, damn. Ah. Well, it's certainly a bit... It's certainly different from the stuff I normally do. When's Deadlock Kappa? I mean, I still could, but holy shit. That just fucking sent me, you know? I'm deciding what to do because I didn't actually think this far. I thought this was going to be like 30 minutes to an hour, and then, hey, we'll do some Deadlock. Yeah. Holy shit. Do I have a recommendation for a 2 terabyte external SSD that won't break the bank? 2 terabyte is a little difficult. I normally... Hold on, there we go. So when it comes to SSDs, the brand I usually go with that I find to be pretty reliable is Samsung. But I don't know how expensive Samsung SSDs are right now. Let me take a look over on Amazon real quick. Samsung 2 terabyte SSD. External. Ooh boy. God damn. Yeah, talk about breaking the fucking bank. Samsung's quality, but it's expensive quality. Fuck. I see a 6 terabyte Seagate for $159. What the hell? There's gotta be a catch there. $159 for 6 terabytes? Never mind, it's an external hard drive. There it is. I was also gonna say I don't know that brand. I don't know that brand. I don't know how reliable they are. What if I just do... 2 terabyte external SSD. That's a Seagate, but again, I don't know quality of a Seagate. The cheapest Samsung one is $374. Like, yeah, like I said, breaking the bank there. That's no. 248, 250. Oh no, again, Seagate, that's a hard drive. Quit recommending me hard drives when I specifically type out SSD, you little shit. I think the other brand to look out for, as far as being like halfway decent, would probably be SanDisk. I don't know. I'm not the most knowledgeable on hard drive brands. Triton might be the one to ask about that. He knows his shit a bit more than I do when it comes to drives, like memory drives. In fact, he recently had to help his he recently had to help his wife with partitioning some shit because I think it was his wife's hard drives, because there was a drive that was like utter trash. So now he's got a brand that he knows to avoid under any circumstances. Oh boy. What to do now? Because I can... I could do... Have I eaten? I have. I made some hash before stream. So I'm not necessarily starving myself. That's a good thing, at least. If I wanted to... since we have gone through this entire thing, I could set aside Deadlock for tomorrow, so that means yeah, I could do Deadlock tomorrow, and that would mean the entire stream for tomorrow would be dedicated to Deadlock, since this entire stream was apparently dedicated to me talking about game consoles. And hey, that would keep up the variety at least, aside from me just playing a whole bunch of Halo. Yeah, you know what? I think that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna call it there for today. However, before I leave, oh wait, nope, wrong thing. Shift Control B. There we go. Before I leave, we are going, since there's a few of us here, and no matter how little of us there are, just gonna mute that. We are going to commence a raid. We are going to commence a raid Shadow Legends. Also, I'm going to download my tier list. There we go. So yeah, we're gonna raid somebody since we have a few people here. Let me just see who is live. And I think since, you know what? Yeah, since this is all like charity stream stuff, I'm gonna find somebody else who's live who's doing the charity stream as well to raid. Well, let me just go back into the Discord here. Which one of you fuckers are live? You. I don't think I've ever interacted with you before, but I don't care. You're going to be interacted with. Never mind, you're not live, son of a bitch. He just ended. Fuck. He just ended his stream, son of a bitch. Curses. Then why does this thing still say he's live? Is it just lagging? It's probably lagging. Nope, it says not. It doesn't say live anymore. Son of a bitch. Are you still live? Is my Discord just out of date? I think my Discord's just out of date. Okay. All right. Well, in that case, we'll just pick someone from my followers, from like the people I'm following. Ooh. Should I rate? Oh, you know what? Yeah, here we go. Here we go. Let's raid Golm. Golm has apparently turned himself into a into a fucking catgirl YouTuber. God damn it, Golm. Don't worry. I'm getting there. Alright, Golm is playing 007 First Light. He's playing the new James Bond game. So let me just set up the raid. Search. Golm. He's got 23 viewers. Alright, people. Click that button. Join in the raid. Alright, 3, 2, 1. Let's go say hi to Golm.